Hello. This is not something I was expecting to make, but I was kind of watching the video I had previously made talking about how Glacial is dead and how you should switch over to Aftershock and Aery, and I was looking at it, and I was looking at the little like PowerPoint I made, and I was thinking, I never really describe why they're good. And usually I feel like I do that, but this time I think I just slipped up and I didn't even describe why Aftershock is so good and why Aery is so good. I kind of just say to run them. And I know you guys probably trust me, because I do have like the credentials of like being good at this game and being notorious at this champion, so I know I'm not like, you can trust me not to lie to you. But also I was like, oh, I guess I didn't really like properly explain it. I just said they're synergistic and they're effective, but I didn't really explain why that was the case. So I'd like to do just a short little video here explaining why they're so synergistic and why they're so effective, because I think that's important to know and to ask those questions. So first I'm going to start with Aftershock, which I did say in the video, and I still do believe to be the most effective option, the most consistent option, especially with in combination with Radiant Virtue. So the reason why this is generally so effective is that obviously Rakan is an engaged champion, and so when you engage, that is when you'd want to be tanky. Obviously, when you're running around the map not really doing a whole lot, you'd rather have utility options like Mikhail's to counter an Ash Arrow, or Redemption to be able to, you know, contribute halfway across the map with like a heal to a fight you're not at, or Shrillia's to gap close and get to a place quicker so you can contribute, right? Utility is more helpful than tanky stats when you are not directly in combat. So the idea is that when you get these tank stats only when you need them, when you enter combat, is phenomenal. You get the tank stats exactly when you need them, and then otherwise you don't get the tank stats when you don't really need them. So it ends up being a really awesome option. Theoretically, this could mean you could run Shirelias with Aftershock to try and maximize utility and then just have the tank stats on their own for when you enter combat, but I don't think that 35 armor and magic resist is enough to really make you properly tanky in any of those fights. Especially considering how much like armor pen and magic pen are running around the game nowadays. You kind of just get blown up if you just have this and you don't like combo with any other tank stats. So I do think it's better to try and synergize Aftershock with the thing it synergizes best with, and that is tanky items. I do think I do mention that in the little PowerPoint thing, but that is why Aftershock generally is so good. It's just because you get tank stats when you need them, when you jump in, and then it lasts for long enough that Rakan can kind of do his thing in combat, and then jump out by the time the resistances have left, when you don't need them anymore. So it's really synergistic that way. Obviously, you don't really have tons of synergy with the minor ones, which I think I may say. Maybe I took that out. Actually, I think I had one take on the like the PowerPoint thing where I talk about why you don't really have great minor runes synergy. There is a video I talk about when I was talking about why Glacial's so good and why Guardian's so bad, and I talked about why Guardian sucked most of all, but also why the minor runes of Resolve Tree generally weren't good. And in that video, I do bash Second Wind and Bone Plating about not being super synergistic with Rakan's passive, due to it not really synergizing generally well with Fae Feathers' laning phase trading patterns of taking a hit and then regenerating out of combat. So these don't really work that well, and Shield Bash is just bad. You shouldn't really run this, because you're not going to walk up and get auto attacks off. It's 300 range, it's not really going to do anything, and you'll likely take it before you can get a W off, and you'll like W and auto for Shield Bash, and the damage is pathetic anyway. Anyway, so the idea is we're taking like the least bad minor runes, while also taking the enormously synergistic and awesome Aftershock, because it combos with his engage so well, and combos with tanky items so well. And that's generally why this is such a synergistic rune, and why it's so effective, because you're an engaged champion, and you want tank stats when you engage, and that's exactly what you get. Pretty much impossible to kill you if you run Aftershock and Radiant. So that's why this is so good. It's very effective because it plays into Rakan's engage, and allows him to always survive these scenarios, almost always. So that's why this is so good. And then we can switch over to Aery here, and we can talk about why Aery is so good. There's also a video I made way back when I talked about why Aery was so good and why its minor runes were so good, but I'll kind of reiterate them here for you as well. So generally the gist with Summon Aery, the actual keystone, is that it has enormously high synergy with Rakan's E-Shield, because his E-Shield, frankly, has a really good AP ratio to it, and honestly, really high base shield. Definitely compensates for this by not giving any sort of secondary effect like other shields, such as how Lulu's shield gives picks, or Janna's shield gives bonus attack damage, and such, or Karma's shield gives movement speed, etc. Right? So you definitely kind of counteract that by having a higher base shield. That's kind of the trade-off, and also you get mobility, obviously. But Summon Aery can apply not only on your first E, but also on your second E, which is fantastic, because that means you can E, get that big base shield off, right? If you're running this rune page, which I believe to be the best one with 1 adaptive force and 1 ability haste, and starting with Relic Shield, you have 14 ability power. That'll make your E 50 plus 10. That'll be a 60 shield times 2 for 120, which is awesome. Aery level 1 shields for like 34, I think, with the AP you get at that point. So then it's like 34 times 2, right? That's 68. 68 plus 120. Okay, it's 188. That's a large shield. Level 1. That's massive level 1. It's like a third of some people's HP level 1. That's like a lot. It's a lot of shield. So that's why Summon Aery is such awesome synergy. Admittedly, not as attractive or nice as Aftershock synergy, because the Aftershock synergy scales really well into the mid to late game. It can even save your ass a little bit in the early game. But Aery's is mostly an early game focused synergy to help you get through bad matchups and really protect your ADC. But also it's phenomenal for just regular duels in the jungle as well as skirmishes. Because you do get incredible Aery value when comboing that with your E. So that's why Aery is such high synergy, because it's just with the E. Obviously with the Q, it's not exactly super intuitive, because you use Q to try and get your heal, but in the process of getting the heal, you Q an enemy champion usually, which means you proc Aery offensively, so it doesn't really work that way to proc it defensively off the heal, unless using it like a point-blank range, wait for Aery to fly back to you, and then use the heal defensively, but that's not super common. So with that being said, Summon Aery does have that awesome defensive synergy with Rakan's E, and that's mostly why you're running it. The offensiveness isn't really much to talk about. It's pretty low, so it's mostly just the defensive use and how high it synergizes with your E for early duels and skirmishes. But really, where the Aery tree shines is not only just Aery's awesome synergy with your E, which frankly, like I said, is not that much to write home about on its own, especially in combination to Aftershock's high synergy across the entire game, and mostly in the mid to late when Rakan is usually trying to play around his strengths of engaging. But Aery is more so strong in combination with its minor rune strength, which is much, much stronger than the Resolve tree. In this case, you have Nimbus Cloak to really increase the strength of your engages. A lot of the time, Rakan incorporates Flash into his engages. He definitely exploits Flash more so than most champions in this entire game do. So getting that extra movement speed on your engage really help gap close with Flash, especially if you're trying to Flash to like close the gap and get manual combos off. You need to do the charm before the knockup, and so this really helps do those. And so just generally this is effective. Also in the early game when you're running people down with Ignite or Flash in like the first couple levels for these really early engages, especially if you're playing Xayah Rakan, this is phenomenal. It really helps you close the gap and run them down and not lose any distance when you use a summon. They're flashing away and then you flash towards them because you have to stop the auto attack and they're not stopping to auto attack you, so you typically lose distance, especially as only a 300 range champion. So Nimbus really helps kind of offset that gap that you usually lose between auto attacks, because then you just like you get all this extra movement speed where they don't have it. So Nimbus is awesome for mid to late game engages. It's awesome for early game duels and those really early fights. In general, this could save your life as well. God forbid you flash defensively, because it is generally better to flash offensively. But if you flash defensively, this could also save your life. If they want to flash after you as well, then you have movement speed. They don't. You get that extra distance on them, and you get to run away, that's pretty awesome. Otherwise, you have Celerity, which not only combos with Nimbus and Water Walking, but also just generally gives you movement speed, which is quite nice. Level 1, or like without tier 1 boots, it's not really anything crazy. You get like 3 movement speed, but by the time you have tier 2 boots, you get plus 7 movement speed, which is awesome. Now, tier 1 boots, you get plus 5 movement speed. And that's actually it's more meaningful than you would think it is. That could mean the difference between actually being able to gap close and land those Ws, or just barely being outside of the range to dodge an ability, or dodge a skill shot. It's much more effective than you'd think it is. It's more invisible power, but it feels quite nice regardless. Obviously, this also synergizes with your ultimate, giving your ultimate a bigger bonus in addition to Nimbus and Water Walking. And speaking of which, there's also Water Walking. This is, I think, like the best part about. I think all three of these are very good. I think this one's the best personally. I'm very partial to Water Walking. I think this is phenomenal. I think getting 25 movement speed when roaming in the early game is so. I cannot understate how strong this is. This makes your roams much more lethal. Means you waste less times on rotations. You get to rotations quicker. You waste less time returning back from roams, and obviously roaming as well, just in general. So like, you save so much time with this rune. It's not only about the ability power you get. That part doesn't even really matter. Although that's nice too, theoretically, if you want to walk into the river and then Q heal off of Dragon, especially if you're on red side where you have much easier access to the river. This is nice to get an improved heal off of Dragon. But mostly it's just for the movement speed in terms of early game rotations. A lot of people really struggle with early game macro play, and this really, really helps, especially in combination with Celerity, which gives you, like I said, an extra bit of movement speed on top of that, making this more like a plus like 35 boost instead of 25, which is really, really awesome. So this really helps out with a lot of early game rotations and just macro play in general. It's very, very underrated. Water Walking is fantastic, but all three of these are fantastic. So that's why these have such high I can't speak. Such high synergy with Rakan. Hopefully that explains it a bit better for anyone that was curious. And definitely my bad for not like describing that already. I was kind of like, I kind of thought about it. I was like, wait, did I describe it? And I kind of felt bad for not describing it. So that's definitely on me. Hopefully this piques the curiosity of anyone who's wondering about Aery and Aftershock in these pages. Obviously, the patch that Glacial's getting nerfed on is coming out in 2 days here. So we're about to say our last goodbyes to Glacial. We'll miss it dearly. And also one more thing before I go. I saw some people, I'm glad people are getting excited about the Aery and Aftershock pages. I've definitely seen some people do some deviations. There is a particular reason why I have chosen these minor runes and these minor runes. In particular, I've seen some deviations, people saying like, oh, I'm going for mana flow band. And I love that people are getting excited about the rune page. I think that's fantastic. But definitely I chose these ones for a reason. I think these are by far the best minor runes and have the highest synergy with Rakan. I think these are the best for a reason, as I've kind of already outlined to you. Obviously, like, yeah, I've already outlined them. I'm not going to repeat myself. Don't want to make this video longer than it has to be. But there's a reason why I've chosen these ones. I wouldn't really deviate. I mean, like, I was pretty tempted to include maybe Transcendence. Because, like, I don't know. Like, extra build haste is, like, generally the strategy on this champion. And then it really, like, if you want to go for, like, your Mythic and then Redemption afterwards, which no longer gives ability haste, or Michaelis, which no longer gives ability haste, then offsetting that with this is really, really nice. And obviously reduced cooldowns on your E and W. Oh, whew. I mean, that's nice too. But ultimately, I find this to be better because it's comboing with these two, with Nimbus and Water Walking, which I think are by far the best option out of these three, is Nimbus for Rakan, and then by far the best option out of these three, Water Walking. So because this synergizes already with Rakan's ult, and it's nice in general, and synergizes with these two, I was like, yeah, it's just the best option by a bit. But anyways, I wouldn't really deviate. I did take a lot of time to, like, choose these minor runes as well. So yeah, it's the reason why I chose these. So yeah, don't go Shield Bash, don't go Mana Flow Band. I mean, obviously, like, I'm not your mom, right? If you really want to go for Mana Flow Ban, it's not the end of the world. I think that having Water Walking celerity is important still. If you really want to go Mana Flow Ban because it makes you happy, I don't recommend it. But obviously, like, right, I'm not your mom. You can do whatever you'd like. But yeah, don't take Shield Bash. The reason why I don't take Demolish, even though it could also be a good option, is just because you want to typically funnel these turret plates into your ADC to help them carry games by funneling gold into them to accelerate their items. I already mentioned anti-synergy here, so conditioning also synergizes well with Aftershock, in addition to not having anti-synergy like these two, and unflinching is just darn good, so we take this one. Not Revitalize, because we're playing to engage, not for an Enchanter build, hence why we're going for Aftershock here, so unflinching. Anyway, I am dragging the video longer than it needs to, so I'm gonna bounce here. Hopefully, this piques, like I said, piques the curiosity of anyone who is wondering. Lots of love to you guys. Yep, that's pretty much it. Deuces. Take care. Bye.